So thank you for the introduction. What I'm going to be talking about now is how we're using cBioPortal as a national database to support the molecular tumor boards in the Netherlands. I'm Bart Koopman. I'm a medical researcher at the UMCG Groningen, and I'm working as part of the PATH project. The PATH project is a national project that aims to optimize the access to personalized cancer therapy in the Netherlands. And I'm specifically working on the work package 3 of this project, which is to establish a national network of molecular tumor boards. So before I get into how we're using cBioPortal, I'll explain a bit about what molecular tumor boards are and what they're and how they work. So as you know, the impact of genomic testing in the Netherlands in cancer has rapidly expanded over the last few years, and we're now testing for somatic mutations, for copy number variations, for fusion genes in a routine setting. But because the amount of markers that we're testing for and also the amount of cancer types that we're testing for is expanding rapidly, it's much more prone to get rare profiles when you're testing in the routine setting. So not only just a single alteration in a single gene, but multiple alterations in different genes coexisting together, or rare mutations in the gene that we haven't seen before, of which we don't know what the implication is. And because of these developments, it's the reason why molecular tumor boards were established in the Netherlands. And the molecular tumor board typically contains professionals from both pathology and oncology, so that's clinical scientists in molecular pathology, the pathologists, and also the oncologists. They use a variety of online resources and databases to assess the pathogenicity and the actionability of the specific genomic variants that are found in a cancer type. And they use that information combined with the patient characteristics and also the histological characteristics to achieve a profile-based and patient-tailored diagnostic or therapeutic recommendation. And every Dutch tertiary cancer referral center in the Netherlands has an MTB. So that's all the academic centers and the NKI. And one of the goals of the PATH project is to establish a collaborative network between these MTBs. So one of the things that we're aiming to do is to guarantee that the quality of Dutch MTB recommendation is similar throughout the Netherlands. We want to promote the exchange of knowledge between the Dutch MTBs and also make the MTBs accessible to other Dutch regional hospitals and pathology laboratories, with an ultimate goal of giving every Dutch cancer patient an equal chance of the most optimal targeted therapy currently available at the time. And it's the second goal, so that's the promotion of the exchange of knowledge between Dutch MTBs, that we are aiming to use the cBioPortal for, because we need some sort of platform that we can share real cases, easily share them with, and also that's easily accessible to search for certain alterations, so that we can see if a strange alteration has been seen before in another center and whether there's knowledge available on that. So we were happy that the trade already had an infrastructure ready for this. So we collaborating with the PATH project, and Trade are collaborating to establish this database. Trade provides the infrastructure and the security, and we provide the data and manage the data ourselves as well. So just to explain what the utility of such a shared database would be, because the molecular cases that we see in the Netherlands are getting more and more complex and rare, we're often dependent on limited clinical reports on actionability of such variants, for example. So just an example, let's say in the Radboud UMC in Nijmegen, they have a patient with non-small cell lung cancer with a mutation in BRAF, and it's not the typical BRAF V600E mutation, which we know we can target with BRAF MEK inhibitors, which is also standard of care for non-small cell lung cancer. But it's a slightly different mutation. It is V600E, but also it's a deletion of an adjacent amino acid, which makes it into the V600_K601 delint E. So of course, when they get a request to give a therapy recommendation for this patient, they would go into the literature online. They would search what the knowledge is on this. They might find that this mutation is known to be activating, but that the reports on actionability are very limited. So in this case, they would be able to check in the national database whether this mutation has been found before. And if we look into the database that is sitting right now, we can see that both the UMCG and UMC Utrecht have reported to have discussed the specific variants in other cancer types, so that's in the melanoma patient and the bladder cancer patient. So they might, based on that information, get into contact with the other MTBs from Utrecht and Groningen, and maybe ask what kind of recommendation did they give, what were the considerations, do they have information that we have not found about this, but also the patients that they have seen themselves, where they treated, and do they have treatment information about that. So basically, this database could be a collection of case reports that have not been published for these rare cases. That's in short what the utility of such a database would be. So I would like to spend the remainder of the slides mainly to walk you through how we've set this up, so how the data flows go, and also the challenges that we've had establishing this, and also the challenges that we are facing right now. So we want to be able to share the cases that are discussed in an MTB, in a local MTB. We want to make it available nationally to the other MTBs. So they need to go from a local database to a shared database. And in the local, so every MTB would need a local database in which they collect their cases with at least the information such as the molecular profile and the type of cancer in which it was found, but also identifiable data, so that if they would receive a question about this, they would be able to go into the clinical records and see what happened to the patient itself. But this identifiable data, we do not want this in the shared database due to privacy reasons. We want it to be as anonymous as possible. So how we are doing this is, say UMC Utrecht has a local database, they would be able to collect their data and use a button to extract data files, temporary files containing the basic information that's required for cBioPortal, such as the cancer type, identifiers, and also the molecular profiles, so the mutations, copy number variants, fusion variants. But the identifier that's available in the local database needs to be anonymized. So, and this has to happen locally at their own institution. But also after the anonymization, it needs to be transformed so that it's compatible with cBioPortal. So we have two options basically for this. The first is that this anonymization and transformation happens in one go locally in the center itself. All the cases would get random codes that would be refreshed every time an upload would take place, and that would be able to be loaded into cBioPortal. And the alternative option, which it's easier for centers that do not have that much experience with this, is that they do a local anonymization and then can share the anonymized files with UMCG, with us, so that we can transform it to make it compatible and then load it up into cBioPortal, the national instance. And if it's there, then all the other centers would be able to access the data, and if they have questions, they would know who to contact. Basically, UMC Utrecht, and UMC Utrecht would know, based on the profile, which they can search in their local database, what patient, which patients had these specific alterations. A challenge that we're facing right now is that we need to optimize these anonymization and transformation steps. So we would like to automate it as much as possible. It would be preferable to be one click of a button, but currently we're mostly working with Python scripts that we have to run manually, and both locally in the center and also in the UMCG. So maybe if there's some developers also in this session, then they can and they would have suggestions about this, they could share those with us. A second part that we need to talk about is the authorization process. So we only want these data sets to be available for members of MTBs in the Netherlands. And of course, the creation of accounts is through Trade itself. So let's say, for example, in Utrecht, we know who is involved with the Molecular Tumor Board there. We have the representatives that we are in contact with, and they want to add new users. They can send those users, which are institutional email addresses, to us, request the access, and then we can request the account in Trade. who then sent the surface gas trace and sent the terms of use for both both the trade terms of use as well as our own developed cBioPortal-MTB terms of use. And these users can get access. But an issue that we also have to deal with is that it might occur that these users are no longer members of MTBs or no longer working at these centers. And they might lose their institutional email addresses, but they would still have a user account in trade. So one of the solutions that we have for this right now is that we would send a periodic email address to all of the users. And if we get an automated email that the user is no longer exists, so the email address is no longer in use, then we'd be able to revoke access of that account. So that's a way for us to ensure that only people who are authorized and also members of MTBs are able to access the data. But this, of course, is not optimal. So that's also one of the challenges that we're facing right now, is how to optimize this to make sure it's safe, but also easy and reliable to validate where the accounts still are in use. So currently, we have 5 centers in the Netherlands that are using the shared database. 3 centers, that's the UMCG, Radboud UMC, and Utrecht, they have data sets available, and 2 other MTBs also can access the data, but to have not shared, you still have to set up a local database to make sure they can share their data. But it's already over half of the 8 centers in the Netherlands that are participating, which is a pretty good score, we think. But it has taken some time, of course, as with every project. We initiated this project in November 2018, and we've run into several delays, which made it a little difficult to set up. We first established the first data set in June 2019, then added data sets for UMCG and Radboud UMC, and finally in May 2020 we had a sort of go live for the other MTBs, in which we invited them to participate, that they can be authorized for access if they want, and also I invited them to share their own data. And so far only in Utrecht this has been the case, and there are several challenges that have delayed these things. One of which is, of course, data security, because we had to take measures to ensure that the privacy rules that are related to patients discussed in the MTBs are adhered to. These patients do not provide informed consent because they are discussed as part of routine diagnostics. So we needed to make sure that the data that is shared is as minimal as possible, and also as least identifiable as possible. So that's what several of the measures we have I showed before were taken. Another is the data availability, and this is probably one of the major problems, is that the MTBs in the Netherlands currently mostly do not have local databases in which they collect their cases. So we are trying to set up these local databases and also set up local infrastructures to make sure that the data that is entered in the database can also be shared safely in the national version of cBioPortal. And finally, it's the pipeline optimization. We have to set up data flows that are easy to use as possible, as intuitive to use, and also, but these setting of these data flows is challenging because I myself am an MD. I'm not a bioinformatician or a developer, so I have limited programming experiences to work with. And this also contributes to the challenges we have in this project. But so far we're satisfied with what we have, and we're working on further developing this project. So to summarize, in the past project we used the cBioPortal to allow data sharing, molecular data sharing among the Dutch Molecular Tumor Boards. And just to summarize, the main current challenges that we're facing are the optimization and automation of the account validation, but also the automation of the anonymization and transformation steps. So like I said, if anyone has suggestions for this, and of course we are happy to hear them. And these are the people I would like to acknowledge for their help so far. Yeah, if there are any questions, I'm happy to answer them.
So thank you, Bart, for that nice overview. Also for the questions, and I definitely hope that during the breakout session you will also be able to ask more in depth about this, depending on which track you choose. Someone is typing a question indeed in the meeting notes. The anonymous narwhal who is typing right now, I am offering you to take over the microphone and ask your question directly to Bart. Might be easier. But also indeed, I do love seeing the question there. So please.
I simply raised my hand, Mariska, so I'm in line also. I'm not the anonymous typer, but anyway.
Go ahead, Gerrit, you can start.
Okay, so thanks for this great presentation, Bart. And I didn't realize you were an MD, so great that you're taking this on as well. So at least there's some more MDs on the call down here. So I had a question about the anonymization of data. That is true complete anonymization and not pseudonymization?
Yeah, it's always pseudonymization, and the reason that it's pseudonymization is because the profiles themselves are pretty unique. We only aim to share the molecular profiles that are complex or rare. Mm-hmm. So naturally, it's very likely. Yeah, it's not very likely that the same profile occurs multiple times. But the way we see it is that when we're sharing this data, we're not necessarily sharing the patients themselves. And when we're asking for data from other centers, we're not asking for the patient information, but we're asking for the knowledge they have on the profile. So it's also possible that multiple of the same profile are present in the database that you saw also with the example that I gave. And in that case, it's not directly identifiable. But what you would need to be able to identify these patients would be to access the local database of the center itself, then find the mutations that were discussed, and then still also access the clinical health records of the center, so that some major steps that you would need to take to be able to de-identify those patients. Okay. That's the type of, so basically it's pseudonymization, but it's as minimal as possible.
But you, in the beginning of your presentation, you also mentioned to actually use this as a collection of case studies, where you not only would be interested in what the judgment would be about the pathogenicity of the variant, but also would want to learn about what treatment patient would have received and what outcomes that would have yielded. So if you would want to have those type of data, you need to update data anyway. So and I'm then still a bit puzzled whether actually using the genomic variant as a pseudonym is the most practical way to proceed. And why not use a kind of pseudo ID and a trusted third-party solution in between? But
I'm not exactly I'm sure if I understand, because you can find which patient it's about by searching in the local database for an alteration or for a profile. So you don't really need a true pseudo ID for it, and we're just giving random numbers to it because you don't need to use the pseudo ID.
Yeah, but the information that you will be looking for in the hospital also will be in separate systems. I guess the variants will not be in directly in the EHR, for instance, or the profile. But yeah, okay.
So I think indeed, I see what you, Gerrit, you are a user. And I think for this, it's really nice and relevant discussion. So if you end up in the same track together later, that would be really nice, because it's not something that can be answered in 3 minutes.
Okay.
It is really relevant, definitely, and we at NKE see it as well. So let's park this question if you're okay, and I would like to give Sergio Martinez Cuesta the microphone.
Yeah, thank you for the talk. I'm curious about your thoughts on, you centered your talk about Dutch cBioPortal, but if you think about the context of European projects such as Elixir, then there could be a potential in the future that you could access maybe data, cancer data from, let's say, Belgium, UK, or other countries. So is that, so I'm curious to know your thoughts on, I mean, you touched upon the anonymization issue. So how can an European project such as Elixir, you think, could help, could help allowing that, transfer of data within the same Elixir node, let's say the Netherlands, or across different Elixir nodes? Do you have any thoughts on that?
Well, I'm personally not familiar with the Elixir project that you're talking about, so I'm not sure. I'm curious about it. If you say that could be a solution, if you're talking about also sharing data with other countries, of course that would be ideal, and it is something that we might be looking for in the future. But yeah, for this project, we're mainly focusing on centrally on the Dutch MTBs to ensure that we're collaborating as much as possible, and then the internationalization is more I think a later step in the process.
All right, thanks.
Okay, so time-wise,